Hello everybody! Let's talk about 7 books that I have read semi-recently, mostly this year, with kitties! Yes, this is beautiful little King Alfie, that's right, and Bilbo's just over there. I'll go grab him, and then you can have a look at him. Come here! So these two are gonna keep me company while I talk about books. Aren't you? Huh? You right? Take a look. Come closer. Oh, aren't you adorable? Okay, stay down. Oh, okay, go on there. You right? There we go. Isn't he? So, 7 books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that I have read semi-recently. Put up a whole lot of topics that people could have, and just gotta rescue something from the cats. And then I'll talk semi-review about it, and just kind of what I thought, which is I guess a review. But it's not like going to go super deep into it. I put a whole bunch of topics about what you'd want to see me talk about, and apparently this was number 1, beating out just very slimly what's it like to work at a suicide hotline. So the first book is Shad Embrox's Shadow of the Conqueror, and this book, which I'm gonna put to the side there, that's somewhat better. It's actually by a fellow YouTuber. And that's might have been part of the reason that I wanted to read this book. Is that I kind of know the guy. I've worked with him, and he's really cool. So it's a book about basically a tyrant who he was a horrible genocidal tyrant, and he took over the world, and then he vanished, and he wanted to repent. So this is years on, he wants to repent from what he'd done. He realizes, oh my gosh, I'm literally Hitler, and he tries to sort of reform himself, and no, don't jump across the table. Oh gosh, they're behind the camera. I'm so sorry if you can... No, they're chewing the microphone. Stop! Jeez. So, come here, look, get away from the microphone. Come on, down here. Yeah, there we go. It was good. It was written for a very particular kind of audience. I think, ow. If you're into Brandon Sanderson, then it's clearly directed at that. Hard magic system, great world building, very interesting, unique world, sort of semi-industrial, Victorian, steampunky kind of feel to it, with kind of a high fantasy undertone. And it's definitely aimed at that. I think that's the big strong points of the story. And yeah, I liked it. It had its flaws. A lot of the flaws that would be with any kind of first writer, first novel of any writer. But also, I think that there was some tension lost due to focus on the action, having to constantly segue away to talk about the world building. But that's almost part of the style of that subgenre of fantasy. Anyways, book 2, The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. So this is a young adult novel, which is kind of part of a series of books that I'm reading, sort of to do with mental health. And the main character in this series, in this book, has basically a he gets stuck in circles of panic, and he does things over and over obsessively. So it is sort of an OCD kind of thing. It's interesting to explore the psychology behind that. So the really interesting premise of the story, it says, not everyone has to be the chosen one. And so throughout the book, there's this kind of narrative going on behind the scenes where you learn about these indie kids, this other group of kids who are supposedly saving the world like in any other YA book. And these are about the kids who aren't the main characters in that story. They're the side characters where nothing interesting happens to them. And it's kind of interesting, because honestly, this book is a really peculiar study in pacing and tension. I nearly went into it in my recent video on pacing, which is that this book has a slow-paced first act, second act, and third act. And it sort of just ends. It doesn't have like a real climax so much. And I think that's sort of part of the thematic idea behind the story. But also because, I'm just going to get some more cats in the background. Let's just do that. Yeah, I think that's sort of part of the scheme of the story that he was going for. But it was still enjoyable because the sort of tension and the ideas that he was trying to explore weren't necessarily based in that kind of tension that you would usually rely on. So I enjoyed that. Yep, read that. That was actually last year, that one. This one I read actually a couple of years ago. I literally just grabbed a whole bunch of YA books because I'm reading YA right now. I'm reading a lot of young adult contemporary fiction. So this isn't YA fantasy. It's YA in the day, today times, usually dealing with strong personal issues. And this brings me to one of my favourite YA books. Don't... Oh no, they're trying to pull the curtains down. It's really adorable. Do you want to see it? Go on. Go on, do it. Go on. So, let's move over here. So we've got more kitties in the background. So Paper Towns is my favourite YA book because it's one of the few books that actually I read this years ago. I'm sorry, it's not like the topic was just books you've read, and I mean I've read dozens. You right? Come here. You okay? I've read dozens of books and I just sort of picked some. But I'm in a YA mood, so I picked kind of the ones that I've read and done. It's one of the only books where I sort of read it and then I got to the end and I was like, holy crap, that's taught me something. Thematically, that's hit me hard. Because the sort of something that happens that he realises at the end of the book, one of the things that Margot Roth Spiegelman calls him out for, I'm like, oh wow, I have done that. And I really like that, because you sort of think about, you always hear about how you've got to try and knock your audience or your reader down with a thematic message. And it very rarely happens. But this one did for me. This one did. And it's written really introspectively, and the movie doesn't capture it, because the movie just can't capture the nuance in YA books, because so much of it is inside the head. So much of it, pages upon pages is just thought, and you can do a monologue over the, narrative over the top of whatever's happening. But it doesn't work. You can say a few sentences and then the audience tunes out. With a book, you can read it, pages and pages, and there's a really crucial scene halfway through it where he's in this mall, and you get the scene where he's in the mall in the film, but it just falls flat because you don't get all of the introspective stuff, because you can't. Yeah. So, here's another book, which is My Heart and Other Black Holes by Jasmine Warger. Now, this is a story about a character called Azelle and Roman, which is it's a mental health book as well. I read a lot of them, try to get my hands on them just to keep reading about stuff that I... What are you doing? What? They're trying to play foosball currently. No, stop. Look, I'm trying to film. Come here. Come here. Okay. And basically, these two characters have drawn themselves into a suicide pact together. And throughout the course of the book, they both, or either of them, I'm not going to spoil which, kind of deal with those thoughts and their feelings for one another. So it's not a great, it's not the quintessential, this is a great YA book about mental health. Not at all. I have a lot of thoughts on how people often pair mental health and a romance, and like whether romance can cure it or make it better. And it's like, on the one hand, yeah, loving someone and having things to live for is a really good thing that plays into people stopping having those thoughts. But on the other hand, love is not a magic bullet. Love is not a pill that gets you out of it, you know. It's a lot harder, and people who are in love, you know, and are suicidal, it can be really hard on them, and it can be really hard on their partners. And I don't see a lot of books deal with that, which I would really like to see. More of. And the book that I'm writing is, in a sense, kind of a response to a lot of these tropes, but won't go into that. So, do I recommend it? I recommend it in a sense that, like, just read it if you're looking to get a good spread of, like, YA stuff that deals in mental health. It's an interesting example, but, yeah. This is Consider Phlebas, and I apologise for the bookmarks in there. This is Consider Phlebas by Ian M. Banks. It's the first in a series, the Culture series, and it's a sci-fi novel. It's a hard sci-fi novel from, like, the 80s, or the 90s? Let me figure it out. When were you published? 1989. 1988. No, first published in 1987. Yeah, so this is a while ago. Really interesting. It's really nicely written, but honestly I don't find the premise that compelling. I find it a bit slow and a bit side questy. You sort of get there and then you've got a problem and you solve it and you can get somewhere else, but ultimately it doesn't add up to much. But apparently got recommended to me by a friend that it is one of the best series he's ever read, and this is only the first in the series, which is apparently a strange one to start off with. All of it is written from the perspective of another civilization in the series otherwise. So yeah, I don't take my thoughts with a grain of salt, but I did enjoy the writing style, but the world didn't grab me as much as I felt it could. Yeah, so the one that I'm reading at the moment, though, is a YA contemporary book called It's Kind of a Funny Story, which I referenced in my recent On Writing Pacing video. And I'm only a little bit into it. I'm only like 100 pages. Yeah, about that much. And I like how it's depicting one particular thing so far, really interestingly. And that is... It's practically about this boy who's very depressed. And there's this interesting scene where he can't eat. He finds it really hard to eat. And... Come here. Ooh. Ooh. Come on. And his mum and parents like put together this whole dinner to make him happy. To like get him to eat, you know, like it's your favourite food, it's got lots of stuff, we tried our best, we all got together, and then he can't eat it, and he has to spew it up. And the way that that Ned Vizzini explores kind of the feelings of guilt around not being able to eat and other people going to the efforts, it's a really nice exploration of that abstraction from, you know, like wanting to be able to eat but not being able to eat, and the guilt that comes out of that because people who don't have that find it really hard to understand. You know, like, it's good food, we put in a lot of effort, you even wanted to, what's the problem? You know, like, and if they wanted to, then the problem must be with me. And that sort of unhealthy... Oh, you're ruining my books, people. That unhealthy kind of toxicity that sort of comes out of it, it's really hard on all the parties. And I really like that exploration. And yeah, so I'm only a little bit into that. I don't know where it goes after that. Apparently I haven't even met one of the main characters yet. And the last book here is Eleanor and Park, which is by Rainbow Rowell, which I refuse to believe is a real name. It's got to be something else. And Eleanor and Park's good. Yeah, it's good. It was fine. Fine. Do you not want hugs? Fine. I want hugs. You're always meant to want hugs. Alfie, you always want cuddles. Why do you not want cuddles today? They're being too playful. They've just been bored. like, all the time. And it's actually been a while since I've read this, like, so much that I can't even really remember much of what happens. Basically, two kids fall in love, and they sort of change one another. It's one of those typical stories. It was good, nothing spectacular, but, you know, Eleanor has a hard life in one way, Park has a hard life in another way. They learn from one another, and it was simple, sweet, and while it's not the best YA book I've ever read, it might be for a particular kind of person who enjoys those types of stories. So, altogether, those are the books that I've read semi-recently. I've read other ones as well, but I sort of couldn't find them. I was just quickly grabbing them when I came all the way to my parents' house to film this with the kittens. Which, by the way, do you want to see more kittens? Of course you want to see more kittens. Come here. Come on. Come here. Come here. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. There we go. Whoop. And no. Oh no. Are they adorable? Oh, hello. You're clawing me now. Do you want hugs at last? Hmm? Nope. Okay, fine. Just go up there. There we go. Either way, that's all from me. That's the vlog for this week in a single take, because they're the only way I can do them. In the meantime, stay nerdy. And no, hang on. In the meantime, yeah, I will get them both because they need to say goodbye to their subjects. Okay, got them. In the meantime, stay nerdy, and King Alfie and King Bilbo will see you in the future.